right, team, it is that time of the week. Once again, welcome to another episode of the Exceptional Leadership Podcast. And as always, I'm your host, Matt Hamilton, delighted to have your company with me. Today, we're going to do a little bit of a deep dive into the topic of conceiving, believing, and achieving. Now, what do I mean by that? I think leadership, in perhaps its grandest form, is the ability to have a vision of something that does not yet exist, and then take your team with you on the journey to making that vision a reality. I think that is probably one of the most beautiful examples of great leadership in action. And there is perhaps no better example of someone who does that on a grand scale than the gentleman that we're going to use to set the scene for our conversation today. And before we get into this little case study, this figure is a controversial one, but I'll ask you to put your political views to one side and just focus on this case study purely from a leadership and entrepreneurial perspective. Let's keep it in the right context, despite the fact that this figure can be seen as controversial, particularly in the current political climate. I am talking about Elon Musk, but I couldn't think of anybody who has brought more visions to reality in such a short time frame than this gentleman. So let's get into a little bit of a case study and set the scene. Here we go. Elon Musk has faced many challenges where people told him that his visions were impossible, but he defied those odds and has made them a reality. One of the most notable examples is with SpaceX and the development of reusable rockets. When Musk first founded SpaceX, many experts in the aerospace industry thought the idea of a private company developing and launching rockets was unrealistic. Even more sceptical were the claims about creating reusable rockets. The prevailing belief was that rockets were far too complex and costly to be reused. Essentially, once launched, they were expendable. SpaceX's first few launches were failures, and many thought Musk's dream of reducing the cost of space travel was unattainable. However, he persevered, and in 2015, SpaceX successfully landed its Falcon 9 rocket after launch, proving that reusable rockets were a possibility. This breakthrough changed the economics of space travel and demonstrated that even ideas once considered impossible could become a reality through innovation and determination. Musk had also faced similar skepticism with Tesla, in terms of creating a mass-market electric car that could be affordable, practical, and desirable. Critics doubted the viability of electric vehicles, but Tesla has become one of the most successful electric car manufacturers in the world. In both cases, people who told Musk that these visions were impossible only saw the first hurdles, not the eventual success. Musk's tenacity and willingness to take the risks have led him to push through what others saw as impossible. And I think Elon is probably a fantastic example of someone who is really future focused and hell-bent on bringing concepts to life that people think are an impossibility. And they are two great examples, SpaceX and Tesla. I think it's fair to say that he has probably had a greater impact in those spaces than literally anybody who has gone before him. So he definitely has some really unique entrepreneurial qualities and the ability to conceive of a future reality that doesn't exist yet, believe enough in himself and the science required to get him and his companies there, and then realize it after many, many years of dedication and hard work. But How does that apply to us as everyday leaders? You might be an entrepreneur starting up your own online business. You might be someone working in a corporation at a team leader level. And I'm here to tell you that it absolutely applies. The concept is the same, regardless of whether you're a multi-billionaire Tony Stark-like figure, or if you are somebody working in a team leader role, or perhaps in a mum and dad business from home. And that is because it takes somebody who is above average to be able to conceive of something that doesn't yet exist and make it a reality. And it's a function of good leadership. You know, we're conditioned to put little faith in words as humans, because let's face it, anybody can talk, anyone can tell us what we want to hear. But at the end of the day, it's through a person's actions that our faith is built, that we really feel like we get to know them, because the proof is in the pudding, so to speak. It's so hard to argue with results. So words mean little and actions mean everything. And of course, it's through our actions that other people get to know us as well. And I wanted to fixate on this point a little bit. You know, you might have had this experience where you've been leading a team and you have a vision. And no matter how well you structure the argument, no matter how well you evidence it, no matter how logical it is, you just can't quite bring people along with you in your team. And what that is testament to is the fact that not everybody is equipped to be able to conceive of something that doesn't yet exist in the same way that you are. And if you are able to do that, and follow through from a belief perspective all the way to the point where you actually achieve it, you are in special company, I would suggest, and you have the potential to be a really impactful leader. And as followers, we need that from our leaders, don't we? You know, regardless of the context, let's take it, you know, back a couple of steps from the grand visionary sort of Elon Musk level stuff, and let's get back down to a boardroom level or a team leader level. You know, it could be, in its most simplest terms, it could be something like, hey guys, we need to restructure this company and the way we do business to get to that next level. You know, to expand our customer base or expand our product range or whatever it might be. And you are guaranteed to have a bunch of people that are really keen and supportive of you. But by the same token, you are absolutely going to have people who just don't really pick up on what you're saying, and you struggle to get them on board. It's super common, specifically in the change management context. Actually, those of you who have been a part of a change management process in your traditional corporate structures will know exactly what I'm talking about. You know, any mention of change to hierarchical structures or org charts generally fills people with fear and anxiety, and you know, your communication and your steady hand has to be really, really good to get the majority of people on board with you. But in my experience, there will always be people who you just can't quite get over the line. And that's when you've got to let your actions do the talking, and you've just got to let your final results speak for themselves. So what we need to do with respect to the conceiving of a vision is we need to make sure that to give it the best chance of success, that we're consultative as leaders, because you're probably quite able in your position where you're up on the balcony watching all the pieces move around, as we talk about. From that semi-distant position, you're probably in a really good place to know what the organization needs, right? You know how to get from where you currently are to where you need to be. Or let me rephrase that. You know where you currently are and where you need to be. That's a better way of putting it. Then the task becomes, how do we get there? What does the roadmap look like? So you can conceive quite comfortably. But the challenge then becomes, how do we get there? And that road is littered with potholes and challenges because, of course, you've got to get your team pulling with you in the same direction. So how can we go from conceiving to that believing and achieving element of the process? And the answer is because it's essentially a change management piece. We know that we have to be really consultative because people are resistant to change. You know, in Elon Musk's case, or down a few levels from that at the change management level in a normal corporation, regardless of size, you'll have that pushback. So how do you take that idea that's in your head and get everybody else to believe in it the way that you do, right through to the point where you achieve it? Well, we know that change management is aided significantly when our communication is on point. And I've quoted this stat before, but a significant number of people in the workforce, according to one study, ended up on SSRI medication during times of change because people are resistant to change. It creates anxiety because of a fear of the unknown, so on and so forth. And the findings from this study were that leaders needed to communicate even more so than they normally would to ensure that that change was successful. So we know what we have to do. We have to communicate really well, i.e. the nature of the change. This is where we want to get to. This is why we're doing it. These are the benefits involved. These are the disadvantages involved. But there's another piece that we need to talk about, and that is the consultative part. So we go from conceiving, but then we get to the believing aspect. So you can communicate, you can do all those things that I just spoke about, but there's one missing piece of the puzzle, and that is, how do you get those people in your team to come on that journey with you? And the way that we do that is by being consultative. What we need to do is we need to get the team having input into that process and telling you how they think that you and your organization should get to that endpoint. And the reason that's so important is that when people feel like they have input, they feel like they have ownership. And when they feel like they have ownership, they feel like they have control. And when they feel like they have control, they start to have that belief themselves because now they're playing a part in steering the ship. And of course, the added benefit to that is that the anxiety and angst around change management subsides because they feel like it's not happening to them. They're actually partially responsible. They're in the driver's seat with you. And that's a really crucial element to keep in mind. If you want to bring people along with you, you have to make them feel like it's partially their idea. And I can promise you, if you focus on that, you're going to have much better results. There's a time to lead from the front, and there's a time to lead shoulder to shoulder with your team, and that is one of them. So if you want to bring a vision to a reality, if you want to go from conceiving to getting everybody along with you, believing in that process, you have to get them involved in that process. However, once we've communicated what is necessary, once we've done our great comms, once we've engaged in our consultation, I can promise you, you will still find yourself in a position where you just can't quite get everybody. And we'll get to the point where you start to get frustrated and potentially fatigued because you know other people are getting it, other people are buying in, but you just can't quite get the rest of the team involved. And it might be confusing you as to why that is. And the reality is that everybody's different. So we need to be careful to understand when the time for talk is over and when it's time for the rubber to hit the road, so to speak. When it's time to say less and do more. You know, there's a point you get to when if people just aren't getting it, you're getting fatigued, you're getting frustrated, and they just tune out. Now you're overselling it. Now you're simply wasting your energy and frustrating yourself and them. So we need to get to a place of acceptance where we understand that we can't win everybody over. That's the stepping off point, I like to call it as a leader, where you just have to get to a point where you trust in the process, you've done all the right things, you've been consultative, you've communicated really well, you know that your vision's a solid one, you strongly suspect it's achievable because you're in the position to know, as I said, up on that balcony, you've seen the way pieces move, you know where you need to get to, and you've taken that next step and means tested your idea by getting the input from your team and adjusting your strategy based on that. But you can't win everybody over despite having done all that. So now we're at a point where the time for talk is over and we have to take action. I mentioned that this was particularly prevalent with respect to change management in corporations. Very, very prevalent. And when we get to the point where we decide to take action, we need to do so with boldness. You know, doubt and timidity affect our ability to execute. So if you're going to take action, do so boldly. Don't half commit, commit fully. If you're going to do it properly. And of course, to reiterate, because this is an important point, before we commit to that action, we ensure that we've planned all the way to the end. We have a solid roadmap. We've done fantastic comms. We've involved people. We've given people the opportunity to have input and have part ownership with us and feel like they have an ownership stake in what is happening. We want to get it to a point where they feel like they, as in our team, feel like they are driving the change rather than in a position where the change is happening to them. It's a very, very different position to be in psychologically. It's chalk and cheese. So to summarize, leaders must have vision. We need to be able to envisage a better future and navigate to that reality while bringing everybody with us, or as many as possible with us. And sometimes there will be no precedent whatsoever to follow. And the Elon Musk example is a fantastic one. No one had ever achieved the reusable rocket scenario before. But if we're in our corporate environment, well, there's plenty of precedent for change. Although I would argue that there are probably, in my personal experience, few examples of it being done well. But I suspect that's just due to poor execution, not because it's an impossible standard to aspire to. And I'm going to go out on a limb and say that'll be the same for you and your organisation as well. It's possible, more than possible. It's just that unfortunately, we don't look after our leaders enough and train them in how to do this stuff well. So it's not that it's an impossibly high bar to execute change management really well. It's just that we have a lack of good education and skill sets around it. So sometimes there will be no precedent to follow. It may be a completely groundbreaking scenario. Let's explore that a little bit more. Let's step out of the corporate space and get into the entrepreneurial space. All of you entrepreneurs listening to this podcast. You know, maybe you're starting your own small business. Maybe you're working out of your living room. You know, maybe you started a podcast like this. Whatever it is, it may be something that no one has done before. Or there may be precedents around that are similar enough for you to take inspiration from. And if there is, that should be fuel for the belief stage in the conceive, believe, achieve trifecta. And that leads me on to this final point, which is that sometimes the scenario whereby someone has a vision is precedent enough for you. Yeah, sure, they might not have set up a similar business to the one that you're attempting to stand up, but the fact that they had the ability to envisage something coming into existence that did not yet exist, that may be precedent enough to fuel you as a leader. That might be all the inspiration you need. What we do know is that new inventions, things that no one has ever seen before, have continued to become a reality from a state of nothingness for the entirety of human existence. And that trend looks set to continue. So we've proved the concept. It is in fact common that people envisage things that do not yet exist and make it a reality. So why can't that be you? If not you, then who? Now, once our good comms are done, we step away from the lectern or put the pen down, so to speak. And that's when we take our leap of faith. That's when we jump off the step-off point that I spoke about earlier. And we invite input from our followers. We bring them along with us. We want them to feel a sense of ownership. But when we've done all that, there comes a point where we just have to believe in the work that we've done and the vision that we've had, and despite the headwinds, set about making it a reality. And it may take months, it may take years. It'll be a lot of hard work, I know that, at the least. But based on all the wonderful things that other leaders and visionaries and entrepreneurs have achieved over the years, we know that it's absolutely possible as long as you've done your homework. Guys, I hope that helps. I hope that helps, because I am aware that this is probably one of the most difficult things to do as a leader. And this is, we can talk about setting up your own business. I mean, I can't remember exactly what the stats are in terms of how many businesses fail, but it is common knowledge that the first 12 months of any new business venture where you're starting from scratch are absolute hell. You've got no customers, you've got no listeners, no one knows who you are, no one knows your name, no one knows what you do. And that whole first 12 months is filled with this mental battle where you're having to deal with the fear and the doubt. Am I engaged in a fruitless pursuit? Am I doing something that is a complete waste of time? Am I flushing money down the toilet? That's how a lot of entrepreneurs feel. But we know that if you can get through that 12 months and win that mental battle and stick with your vision and commit to it and make intelligent decisions based on logic, not emotion, if you're prepared to work hard, you can absolutely achieve. And we know on the change management front that it's possible as well. And I'm hopeful that due to podcasts like this and people like you who are actively seeking to improve yourselves as leaders, that we can get to a point where change management on a whole across all industries concerned is done in a much better fashion because people are taking it seriously. But it will be difficult. And you'll find that while you listen to material such as this and you try and improve yourself and your leadership skills, a lot of other people don't. And so you might know the right way to do things. But those amongst you, perhaps leading the change, may not be aware of the right way to go about it. They might not know the data behind communication and how important it is during times of change. They might not know that the use of antidepressants and antipsychotic medications skyrockets in workforces during times of change. They might not know that in surveys of senior managers and CEOs in organisations that have been conducted, the majority of them think change management rarely succeeds. These are some sobering figures, but this is the reality. And then there's your own experience. Have you ever seen widespread change management in your organization or an organization that you've worked for done well? I have very, very few cases from my personal observation where I could look back and say that was done well. And you know what? Usually it's not because the bar's super high, it's because the basic competencies of leadership are not adhered to. And I suspect that comes from a place of ignorance, which is why podcasts like this exist. So guys, use that as fuel, use that as inspiration. I want you to conceive, believe, and achieve. I want you to understand that as leaders, it is your privilege to take people on that journey with you. And I want you to know it's going to be hard. But I also want you to know that there are few things as satisfying as having the suspicion that something that does not yet exist is possible, believing in it despite all the headwinds and the doubts, and then seeing it come to fruition. You are creating. And what a beautiful, beautiful place to be that is, where you're essentially adding something of value to the space that you occupy, or the network that you interact with, or the world that you live in whatever format that may be. I don't think there's anything better than creating something that benefits people as a leader. And that is the task that I'm going to set you. Conceive, believe, and achieve, and bring people along with you. Guys, we'll leave it there. Thank you so much for joining me once again. What I will do is just direct your attention to the show notes. There is a send us a text link. I mention this at the end of every podcast, but I am very, very keen to get your interaction. So if there is something specifically that you want or need covered, feel free to hit me up using that text link. You will then basically have an email or a text message deposited to my email, and I'll be able to read out on the show that question. You can have a shout out or you can be anonymous. It's completely up to you. But if it is something that I think is relevant to us all and suitable for our programming, then I can incorporate that into the show and we can address that question directly. Of course, follow the Exceptional Leadership Community of Practice LinkedIn page. The link to that is in the show notes, along with the Instagram account as well. If you're not following that, you're missing out, guys. Jump on that link and subscribe to the Instagram account for reels and more content. And of course, whatever app you consume this podcast on, make sure you subscribe and leave us a great 5-star review. Thank you so much for your company, guys. I'll see you for the next one.